There are places in this world that appear only when someone is ready to fear them. Hallways that stretch too long, rooms that breathe, shadows that stand where no shadow should be. But the corridor he found was different. It did not simply appear. It waited. He lived in an old apartment building. Nothing special. Thin walls, flickering hallway lights, neighbors he never met, and a constant hum of distant city noise that lulled the nights into uneasy quiet. He worked late, came home after midnight, always tired, always moving on autopilot. He had walked the same path from the elevator to his door hundreds of times. But on a cold, silent Tuesday night, the building changed. Not loudly, not violently, just subtly. Enough that only someone awake at the wrong hour would notice. When he stepped out of the elevator, the hallway felt colder than usual. The light above him flickered, then settled into a dim, trembling glow. He walked forward, keys in hand, half asleep. But after a few steps, he stopped. The corridor was longer, not slightly longer. Not, maybe I'm imagining it, longer. Much longer. An entire stretch of hallway extended where a solid wall had always been. He knew this building. He knew its shape, its layout, its flaws. And a hallway did not belong there. He blinked, rubbed his eyes, waited for his tired brain to snap back into place. But the corridor remained, silent, dim, unmoving. He felt the sensation of being watched, not from inside a room, not from behind him, but from the far end of that new corridor. Something was there, something standing still, something waiting. He didn't breathe for several seconds. Then he shook his head, forced a laugh, and walked to his apartment. As he closed the door behind him, he could swear. The new corridor grew 1 inch longer. The next night, he returned home at nearly the same hour. Midnight 29. The elevator doors opened, and the corridor was waiting for him again. Longer now, much longer. He stared at it, heart beating slowly, heavily, the way hearts do when they already know the truth, but refuse to accept it. The air coming from the corridor felt cold and old, like it had been trapped behind a sealed door for years. He took one single step toward it. The lights above him flickered. The shadows on the floor stretched unnaturally, as if reaching. Something moved at the far end. Not a person, not an animal, just movement. A shift in the darkness. A ripple, like someone stepping back quickly, vanishing from view. He froze. The faint hum of the building stopped. No wind, no pipes, no distant traffic. Only silence. A silence that pressed against the eardrums like pressure deep underwater. He whispered into the empty air. "Hello?" The building answered with a soft creak. Then another. Then a sound like breathing, but too slow to be human. He took a step back, and the lights behind him, on the real part of the hallway, dimmed in response. Something wanted him closer. He didn't give it the satisfaction. He turned, hurried to his apartment, closed the door, and leaned against it with shaking hands. Inside his room, his phone vibrated. A notification, a message from an unknown number. Just one word. Closer. He didn't sleep that night. Every few minutes he heard faint tapping sounds outside his door, sometimes soft, sometimes sharp, always rhythmic, like someone or something was learning to knock. On the third night, he decided to test it. If the corridor wanted him, he would see how far it went. He returned home early, 11:45 p.m. The hallway was normal, short, innocent, harmless. But when the clock hit exactly midnight, the light above him flickered. Twice. Then the corridor slid into existence, not suddenly, not magically, but smoothly, like a shadow stretching across a floor at the speed of a slow exhale. He stepped toward it. The air shifted, the cold thickened, his breath fogged. And from the far end of the new corridor, he finally saw it. A figure, a silhouette, tall, thin, unmoving, not approaching, not hiding, just standing and staring with a patience that felt inhuman. He whispered, "Why are you here?" And from the far end, in a voice that sounded like dust sliding across concrete, came the answer, "I'm not here. You are." The lights behind him died. Only the corridor remained. He froze as the figure tilted its head, slowly, too slowly, like bones grinding together. It whispered again, "You've walked this place before." His throat tightened. He tried to speak, but the corridor swallowed the sound. The figure stepped forward. One step, then another. The hallway grew longer with each step, stretching into impossible distance, warping like a dream unraveling. He stumbled backward, tripping over his own fear, escaping blindly toward the safe part of the building. And the corridor responded, shrinking back, closing itself, pulling the figure away like a rubber band snapping into darkness. When he reached his apartment door, the corridor was gone. Only the normal hallway remained. But the silence was smiling. He knew he should move out, should leave everything behind, should run. But the next night, he found himself standing in front of the elevator again, waiting for midnight. Humans are strange like that. We fear what calls us, and still feel the urge to answer. When the clock hit 12, the corridor returned, longer than ever. The figure stood at the end, but it was different this time. Clearer, more solid, less shadow, more form. It raised an arm, not to beckon, but to mirror him. His breath froze, the figure's breath froze. He lifted his hand slowly. The figure lifted its hand, not afterward, at the same time, perfectly synced. A realization slipped into his mind like a whispered truth. It wasn't watching him, it was copying him. The corridor grew brighter, dim, but bright enough for him to see more detail. The shape at the end was not a stranger. The shape was him. Same height, same posture, same trembling breath. But its face was wrong. More shadow than skin, more hollow than human, more empty than a reflection should ever be. He whispered, "What are you?" The figure tilted its head again. Then it answered in his exact voice, "I am the part of you this world forgot." The hallway stretched violently, walls bending, floor elongating, lights flickering like dying stars. He stumbled backward as the figure stepped closer, its footsteps silent but heavy. The air thickened, the shadows pulsed. His ears rang with pressure. The figure whispered, "Come back." Then, with a voice made of all his regrets, "You stopped walking, but I never did." The corridor surged forward. The figure rushed toward him in a blur of distorted reality. He slammed into his apartment door, fumbled for the handle, fell inside. The moment the door closed, silence. The lights outside returned. The corridor vanished. The figure was gone. But inside his apartment, his phone buzzed again. A new message from the same unknown number. One word: tomorrow. He didn't go to work the next day, didn't eat, didn't speak. He just waited. Because deep down, behind the fear, behind the confusion, he knew the truth. The corridor wasn't appearing in the building. It was appearing in him. It was a path he had forgotten. A path he had walked once. A path he abandoned too soon. And now that path was coming back to collect him. When midnight arrived again, he stepped out of his apartment and closed the door softly behind him. The hallway was empty, the air was still, the lights flickered, and the corridor unfolded in front of him. Long, endless, waiting. The figure stood at the far end, calm, patient, resolved. Not a monster, not an entity, a continuation. He took a breath, then he took a step. The figure took the same step. He walked forward. The figure walked forward. Their breaths aligned. Their shadows merged. Their shapes fused into one. The corridor closed silently behind him, and he was never seen again. But late at night, after midnight, when the building creaks quietly and the lights begin to flicker, some tenants swear they hear footsteps, slow and synchronized, as if two versions of the same soul are walking endlessly down a hallway that should not exist.